Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. I am Prakash Zom. We've talked of how sun's energy through photosynthesis gets stored in food and how we get it from this food. Not just we, but the animals too. But not all the energy that is stored gets used up. There is a lot of wastage and there is a lot of energy still left in the waste that we dump out. There's a lot of unused energy. And we know that nature is very efficient. So nothing can go to waste. So from these waste products also some insects and others manage to get their own food and their sources of energy. There's a process reverse of photosynthesis, diagenesis as it is known. It's breakdown, either partial or complete, of the variety of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, etc. that are there in our body as well as around us. This diagenesis also causes a change in the chemical composition of these materials, and new compounds are produced which have a lot of energy still left in them. Over the ages, man has learned to use this so-called waste in a number of ways, right from manure to using it as fuel also. With scientific advancement over the last 150 years, the biggest area has been what is typically known as fossil fuel, petroleum, crude oil, natural gases, coal, etc. Petros is stone, oleum is oil. So petroleum is nothing but oil from stones. It is this petroleum that we will try and understand today because it is one of the most important sources of energy that we humans have been using for the last 150 years. Once any organism, whether it's plant or animal, dies, its body has a lot of energy in its body parts in the form of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, etc. Either this body is eaten up by somebody else or it decomposes. Actually, decomposition itself is breakdown of this material within the body by microorganisms. That's either for their own food or it is given back to nature as gases or fertilizers or waste for us, but not for the world around us. Because everything finally gets recycled. And then we must also understand what these bacteria and microorganisms are. They're basically of two types. The first is known as the aerobic, and the second one is anaerobic bacteria. The aerobic bacteria are the ones uh, that live, survive, and utilize environmental oxygen. And because of it, they break down all the material that is around us uh, as waste products into either gases like H2S or methane or ammonia, into nitrogen. And many a times when we say that food degrades and it stinks, it is because of these gases. The biogas that is nowadays talked of is also the same thing. And these anaerobic bacteria, those are the ones that grow or survive in the absence of free oxygen, basically free air, because of the word which is obvious. Uh, aerobic breakdown is something that we typically call as rotting, and the products are then free of many of the gases and other particles that I just talked of. Whatever is left becomes fertilizers, broken down particles that can be used by plants for restructuring their materials once more, the raw material for further development. There's one more issue that we must talk of. There are a number of different cycles in nature. We'll talk of some of them later, but there are equally many food chains in nature. They all have a standard structural pattern. It's a pyramid. And you go from the simplest ones at the bottom, which is extremely large, into higher and higher ones who start consuming the lower ones. And so their number becomes less and less till you reach the apex, the topmost predators. Luckily, humans are also in this topmost area. And obviously, since it's a pyramid, the number below is extremely large. It far exceeds the number above them. They're eaten up, consumed. Uh, but not all lower sources of energy get fully utilized. The surplus starts building up in quantity over a number of years. And this is the dormant storehouse of immense energy that man has learned to utilize. It's far more than we can imagine. There are some very small animals or organisms in the sea, because sea is the major source of everything, and these are categorized into what is known as the planktons. Planktons are a diverse collection of aquatic organisms that can't swim or go against or travel against current. They just drift along because of ocean currents and various other reasons. Out of these, there are two major classes. One is the phytoplanktons. Phyto is associated with plants. So these are all plant-like. They are autotrophs. That means they produce their own food by photosynthesis. They are the lowest in the food chain anywhere in the world. Naturally, their number and mass is extremely large, in trillions and trillions of tons, that these are produced every year in the sea. Then there are also algae, which are also photosynthetic, but they are technically eukaryotic. That means their cells are without the nucleus, but they also cause photosynthesis. It is these two that are the major contributors for everything. Uh, Phytoplanktons account for nearly half of all the photosynthetic activity that goes on in the world, and half the amount of oxygen that is produced is because of these phytoplanktons. I told you long back that the very atmosphere that we have has been produced by these blue green algae and factors of this sort. And today, phytoplanktons are just about 1% of the total living biomass that is around. But still, they are the major contributors. These phytoplanktons form the primary step in the biggest food chain in the world. The phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton. Zooplankton obviously means the ones that are living organisms. They're originally microscopic, and they start building up in size. If you take a spoonful of seawater, you might have as many as about 1 million microorganisms in it. That's the extent of number that is there around. And as they start building up, they start becoming larger and larger. And they then form a group that is known as the krill. And these krill become the first major diet for fish, and the fish become the diet for the next fish, and so forth. And this is how the food chain starts rising. There's a similar food chain on land also. These zooplankton are animal like, and they consume the major part of the phytoplankton and start going to the higher and the next level in the pyramid. Even if the phytoplankton are not eaten, they live only for about a few days. They keep drifting up and down in shallow waters where there is sunlight for them to cause photosynthesis. And in about a week or so, they die and then sink to the bottom of oceans. Only a part is utilized by the zooplankton, and the major part sinks down as organic matter after it's dead. The seabed then becomes covered with these. Some of them are eaten up by microorganisms there also, but then they get deposited with sediment and layer after layer of dust and grime that is around. Sea itself is a few kilometers deep, so there is immense amount of pressure there. Layer after layer is being formed. Something similar even happens on land. Earthquakes take place and a lot of organic matter gets buried and goes under pressure. Realize one more thing. Below, in these sediment layers, in these seabeds, there is no oxygen. The lowermost layers are mostly very stagnant form of water. So there is hardly any oxygen, less than about 1% in them. And on land also, underground deep layers, there is no oxygen. Temperature is high, the pressure is immense, and there is no free oxygen there. But there are other microorganisms, the other category that I talked of, the anaerobic bacteria. The plankton, the dead material, have carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc. And all of them contain oxygen. So the breakdown of these materials and use of that oxygen starts off. And this is what is done by the anaerobic bacteria. Remember what I told you? There is carbon, there is hydrogen, there is oxygen, but usually in carbohydrates, hydrogen oxygen combination is in the water molecule pattern. There is also phosphorus, there is nitrogen, there is sulfur, there is Fe, there is Mg in all this matter. But as I told you, major part is carbohydrates, which is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in that H2O proportion. And that's why the word has the ending hydrate. Now, these anaerobic bacteria start using up all the oxygen. And so what is left is majority of it is only carbon and hydrogen. Hydrogen and carbon. Rest of the material is very elements etc. are very small in number. So this hydrogen and carbon has been given a separate name of the material that is now formed and remaining. It's typically nothing but hydrocarbons. Plus there is a lot of waste, whatever is left, dust and dirt and other stuff and other elements and so forth. These are all treated as impurities. In science, whatever is in smaller quantities also is referred to as impurity. If I take a big chunk of copper and put a little bit of gold in it, gold is also an impurity. Uh, and this process, how long has it been going on? Right from the beginning, right from the time when the seas were formed, more than a couple of billion years. Just imagine then how much of such material must have been stored up at the bottom of the sea as well as trapped in land underground at quite a few places. what it forms is called kerogen, a waxy, insoluble mass, darkish in nature. It is a part and parcel of all the sedimentary rocks in shale, that is very soft type of material. And all this sticky mass, because it is insoluble, gets settled down deep underground. Temperatures there could be in the range of around 50 degrees Celsius, and the depth usually is around 1 kilometer and more. And all this mass of material remains underground. How much? Realize how many years I'm talking of. It is of the order of 10 raised to 19 kilograms, which means 1 followed by 19 zeros. My God, that's a lot of material. It's 10,000 times more than all living material that is around us. 10 raised to 19 is a pretty big number. A million kilograms has only 6 zeros. A billion has only 9 zeros. And I am talking of 10 billion times kilograms. So much of material is there, trapped underground in the form of kerogen. There's also, as I told you, a lot of pressure. And because of that, there's something known as geopolymerization that takes place. It results into formation of larger molecular groups of this carbon and hydrogen chains. Uh, the deciding factor, of course, is the pressure and temperature. How many chains are formed, what is the length of the chain, all depends upon the amount of pressure and temperature at that particular point. It need not necessarily remain a long chain. Because of these pressures, they also form closed groups. These are known as closed chains and loops. And they create a different type of set of chemicals. I'm going to come to that maybe next time sometime. Uh, so all this matter and mass in kerogen is down below. Everything in chemistry has a formula, but you can't put a formula to this because it's just a mixture. It's a mixture of a number of small chains of various lengths and all other trash material that is around. So kerogen itself does not have any formula of its own. And suppose these bacteria in fact manage to release even the hydrogen, then what would happen? This takes a much longer time, millions of years. And in that case, what is left is only carbon. And all this pure carbon is nothing but the coal deposits that are around the world. Because of geological movements, uh, this underground material and layers drift towards land masses, move away from seabeds to different regions. You must realize one more thing. This is a waxy, sticky, liquidish material. It is the impurity within it, metals and other stuff that is around, that decides on the color of this material that is there. It could be black, it could be brownish, it could be greenish, it could be reddish, depending upon whether there is sulfur or other compounds that are present in it, other elements like iron and others. All this makes it a very sticky, dirty mass that keeps drifting around. Drifting? That's because some of the stones are porous and some are not. So it starts moving through the porous ones and starts collecting in different regions or pockets around. And this then causes different areas where all this mass starts gets stored in the form of deep basins, etc. There are also structural traps. Many of you all must have heard of the word Bombay High. And Bombay High is within the sea. How can you have high within the sea? So actually it is not the sea where the high is, but it is geologically deep down inside the ground below the sea, where because of the structural upheavals, there are porous areas lower down and non-porous areas that are on top like this. So the geological structure is something like this, but there is sea all on top here. So it's a high area below which this kerogen in the form of darkish liquid has been stored and has collected. And because of this geological structure far below the sea, it is called as Bombay High, now Mumbai High, obviously. So this is all because of the structural pattern. And this kerogen is nothing but what we talk of as black gold, crude oil. It's not just the oil that is there. The carbon chains are pretty small. It gets released in the form of gases, and they also remain on top, trapped there on top. So collectively at these points, invariably there is this darkish liquid or what is known as crude oil and gases that are trapped. So what do? You make a hole, drill down inside, go deep down and pull all that material out. And this is then stored in barrels. And so the unit used obviously for measurement of oil, crude oil, is barrels. A barrel is 35 imperial gallons or 42 American gallons. This number, if you convert it in terms of kilograms, it turns out to be 159 point something, so many kilograms. We could take it at about 160 kilograms is one barrel in which that crude oil is present. And this crude oil is a mixture, a mixture of a number of things. It looks black, but it's black gold. It is said to be the cornucopia, a boon for humans, discovered by the humans actually long back, but then its importance was not known as much as it is known today over the last 100 years. This is one of our most important sources of energy. How it is put to use, how it is extracted, how it is converted into a number of things that we know is something that we will take up next time and understand what this black gold is. Till then, namaskar.